Kathleen, can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Yes, fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to try and share the screen. I'm in the hands of a professor of robotics though, so I'm sure we'll have no technical problems whatsoever. Here we go. Because I wanted to start off by showing you a short video, which hopefully will give everyone a little chuckle, because God knows we could do with a bit of laugh at the moment. So this video is actually about one council and one strip club and the battle, one of the battles, the many battles that's been going on there. This strip club, after over 200 breaches were proven of wall-to-wall sexual contact, came up with all sorts of excuses, fig leaves of excuses, which allowed the council to continue to license it. So let's go to the video. So I should probably have started off by introducing myself. I used to run the group Object and now run the group Not Buying It. Object actually changed the law, 2 laws around the sex industry, and Not Buying It with other groups, particularly in Sheffield, has been using equality law to challenge the licensing of strip clubs there. And I've had two successful legal challenges, and we're about to have a third in light of that decision by Sheffield City Council. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the law and what I'm saying. And let me try and get on to the next slide. Oh, sorry, here we go. Okay, I just wanted to start off by putting things slightly in perspective, because I know how absolutely overwhelming it can feel at the moment. Where here we have internet porn, we have social media, we have extreme ideologies, and the idea of changing anything seems absolutely impossible. So as I see it, you have the man, and in this case, I guess you could say the man was the council, like many, many other councils when it comes to strip clubs. It's the powers that be, it's the patriarchy, it's capitalism. And we also have society, which very much, because it's made up of human beings, perhaps who don't really like change to happen, it likes to keep the status quo, which suits the man perfectly. So here he is trying to keep the status quo, harmful attitudes, and trying to prevent change. And the kind of tools he's using at the moment is internet porn, which is overwhelmingly harmful and overwhelmingly powerful, because it obviously gives a huge rush of sexual pleasure. So why would anyone want to change that? And because of the huge numbers, including our children, who are accessing it. Social media, another hugely powerful tool, which again helps reinforce harmful attitudes and helps prevent change. Extreme ideologies, but we've always had extreme ideologies. So if you go back to the past, you think about the Suffragettes, the match girls, people fighting slavery, hundreds of years. I mean, slavery, an extreme ideology. Women having no vote and no rights, extreme ideologies. Labourers having no rights. These are all pretty extreme ideologies. And yet our sisters and brothers in the past, they fought and they won. And how overwhelming must it have felt to them? Far more perhaps than now. So thanks to them, we now have far more laws, and so in some cases anyway, much better attitudes than we would have had in the past. Now, I don't know if you can see, but right to the corner, I put the future, AI, and whatever else that might be thrown at us. So obviously we'll have different tools that are being used against us to keep the man happy, to preserve harmful attitudes, to prevent change. But I think the underlying ways that it is done is not going to be that different. I'd also like to add that I know it's very, very hard not to think of technology as this really awful thing, because you immediately think porn. But I think we need to remember, actually, technology can be our greatest friend. I mean, if you think about the internet and social media, it's given us huge opportunity to organise. We're having this event today. The suffragettes, I mean, how do they do it without email, you know? Technology is probably going to be the only way to get rid of all the harmful content using things like bots, because I don't know if any amount of human moderators will be able to do it. It's also a way for us to get out the messages. We need like loads of young people, kids, involved with our campaigns, using their media like TikTok and Snapchat and all the rest of it to get out our message instead of the message of the man. So I want to talk a little bit, I put this in just last night because I was reading up a bit about the match girls. Now the match girls, who you probably know about more than me, they were women, and very often girls, literally girls 18 and younger, who had to work because they had basically no other chance of earning an income. They had to work in factories making matches, and in some of these factories they were using this very, very toxic chemical called red phosphorus, and this caused horrific disfigurement to the face, terrible, terrible pain, toothache, cancer, and ultimately death. So even young girls were experiencing this. So I was just thinking, this was in the 1880s and even before. If they had done an honest job advert for a matchstick girl, it would have read something like this. Hyper low pay, they were paid 5 shillings a week, which even then was ridiculously low. Frequent fines, they'd be fined if they were late, if they didn't get permission to go to the loo. No regulation, no worker rights, with the added benefit of disfigurement, cancer, death. But if you flip forward nearly 150 years to 2020, if we were having an honest advert for lap dancing, it would read like this: paid to work, frequent fines for being late to work, no regulation, no worker rights, with the added benefit of sexual assault, trauma, PTSD. Just think it's quite shocking. It kind of shows the power of the man when he's left unfettered and unchecked, which is really what's happened with the porn and sex industry. But it also shows the lies, which I think has been talked about quite a lot already, the misinformation, the lies. But it also should give us some cause for hope, because if women knew this, how many young girls would ever choose to go into lap dancing or the rest of the sex industry? And really, if you think about it, it feels to me that a lot of the pimp lobby, a lot of the arguments, a lot of the industries, it's like a colossal structure, but it's built on quicksand with no foundations, because it's built on total misrepresentation and lies. It's a real Achilles heel there. So if we can start to really crack through this, we really could win. So how to affect change? Obviously, the first thing you always think about is public pressure, activism, and so on. And public pressure is a way to change the law sometimes, but it can also be a way to get corporates, who again are as powerful as they've always been. It can be a way to get corporates to change what they're doing. And it can also be a way to simply get social attitudes to alter. So for public pressure, the kind of things that help are having mainstream NGOs on board, not just women's groups, but the wider human rights sector. But this is the sort of way you see the sabotage starting to come in. So there are very, very many mainstream women's groups, not to mention the wider human rights sector, who do not want to touch porn or prostitution. You even have trafficking groups who are neutral on prostitution. You have anti-trafficking groups who are actually pro-prostitution. That's how comprehensive the sabotage has been by the pimp lobby. Mainstream movements now, like the Women's March, pro-prostitution, Me Too, I think they don't have a stance on porn, which seems almost ridiculous, really absurd. You have issue-specific groups. No More Page 3, I'm sure many of you know about. They ran this incredible campaign to get rid of page 3 of the Sun. And within 2.5 years, they did it. And this had been around for 2.5 generations. Stop Funding Hate. I mention them because they use some fairly similar tactics to No More Page 3. So Stop Funding Hate isn't particularly concerned with women's rights, but they did take on the Express, which is or was a horrifically racist newspaper. I mean, it made me sick to the stomach every time I looked at it. And they used a very similar tactic to No More Page 3. They took on the advertisers of the newspapers. And the press at the moment, and for the foreseeable future actually, they're in real financial difficulties. And the traditional press could go under the next few years. So if you go after their advertising revenue, you've got them by the short and curlies. So they went after them, and as a result, got rid of Page 3. The Express got rid of its editor team, and it's now made lots of statements that it's changing, it's going to get rid of the racism. So, you know, hugely powerful going after the corporates. Black Lives Matter I mention here because it's a real demonstration of how a trigger is often what is needed to get something to happen. And of course, the horrific trigger in America was the death of an unarmed, defenseless, totally compliant Black man by the police who were there to protect citizens, not kill them. And that has obviously triggered something massive, really, an earthquake, not just in America, but across the world. And let's hope it really starts to see real change there. But you could say, well, we have that trigger all the time in basically every porn video, where you see defenseless women and children being horrifically raped and abused, sometimes killed, on video for us and our children to see at a click of a mouse. But that doesn't seem to be a trigger when it comes to the porn industry. Other things that help, obviously, having the media on board would be very, very helpful. I have to say, I think the media is worse now than it has been. It's worse than it was 10 years ago when we changed the laws on strip clubs, which used to be licensed like cafes, totally bizarrely. They're now licensed like part of the sex industry, which is exactly what they are. The media was actually quite willing, quite interested in listening to our side of the story. They were quite interested in interviewing survivors and finding out what the reality of the industry was. Now, I very much feel, and others who work in this area would agree, the media's really been saturated, it's been sabotaged by the pimp lobby. So even when you say, look, I've got all these women who survived lap dancing, they want to talk to you about this club or about the industry generally, they're often not interested. If they do the interviews, they're never published. Some media have even said, well, we'd have to give their full names and show their faces on television. You know, I mean, obviously you can't do that, and basically it becomes a form of censorship. Education, this is so important. And I know it can be the kind of slow burner, like going into schools. But imagine how powerful it would be if survivors or videos of actors speaking the word of survivors to safeguard them, if they were in school assemblies and school workshops, it could be incredibly powerful. And we know that it is because in France, where they've enacted the Nordic model, which criminalizes pimps and punters and doesn't criminalize anyone who sells sex, it helps everyone who sells sex out. In France, part of the rehabilitation program they're doing for sex buyers is to show them videos of actresses speaking the words of the kind of women that they've been using and buying in prostitution. And over 80% of the men...
Sorry to interrupt. Time is running out, so can I give you 1 minute to wrap up, please?
Oh, really? Oh,
yes,
my goodness, I've got so much more to say. Okay, if anyone wants to talk about the rest of all of this in questions, that would be great. Okay, I'll just do this. So what they found with the sex buyers in France is over 80% of the men walk out of these seminars in tears saying they're never going to buy sex again. They've been rehumanized. So it gives real hope to us all that actually the dehumanization, which is pivotal to the sex industry working, both for the buyers and the women and men being abused in it, it can be reversed. I just want to finish up. I don't know if you can see here in the corner, Trafficking Hub, but this is a petition that's been set up by Exodus Cry in America, and it's also being worked on by NCOSY, which is another big American group. This has got over 1 million signatures by individuals to try and get Pornhub shut down, as it is basically a hub for trafficking, rape, child rape. And that has actually started to see much more media discussion about porn, where they're actually talking about how harmful porn is. And they also are then going after the corporates, just like No More Page 3 and Stop Funding Hate did. And my understanding is that PayPal now will no longer allow payments to Pornhub, and other credit card companies are also thinking about doing this. So I'll finish there. I had a huge amount more to say, as you can see.
Yeah.
But I will stop now. I'll leave this up and I will stop screen share.